Hello. Oh, can you hear me? I hope you can hear me. Let's see if you can hear me. Sorry I'm so late. We ate late. We had reservations at 7, but we got back around 9 because it was just down the road, and we had a good time. It was very good food and everything like that. Because of what happened with Ethan and everything, there's a kind of a, just a different. I always have something in my hair when I get on here. Like, what the heck is in my hair? What is that? Like fuzz in my hair. What the heck? It's crazy. Audio check is good. Hi, video reel. How are you? Happy Thanksgiving. And then, just as I was going to come on, like before, around, I don't know when I was ready to come on, 12? What time is it now? 2? Ethan and I had a talk for like 2 hours. So, yeah. It's a messed up freaking thing. It really is. Totally messed up. Let me see, I've got videos playing. I don't know what I have playing. But now I'm like too wound up. So I said I'll come on for a little bit. I don't know how long I'll be able to read or whatever, but I'll do it. We'll see. And I don't know. Life is a crazy thing. And Ethan says, like he said when he was driving over to the other friend's house, a song came on by, what did he tell me it was? It began with an E. One of his favorite songs, and mine's a blank right now. But he said, E for Emily, and he said, Mom, I talked to her in the seat. He talked to her in the seat next to him on the way. And he said, I cried, and I don't understand how I'm not going to just look over and see her eyes anymore. And she was a really good person. So, a lot of grief. Anyway, so not to bring a damper on everything, it's just so senseless, so absolutely senseless. My daughter even became so angry during dinner talking about it. She's just like, she just blurted out, so like effing something. What does she call him? Effing monster or something, And I mean, it's easy. It's easy to be really, really angry. And then to start saying, well, why did the parents, allow him this access, and how did they not know what's, oh boy. I don't know, we'll see. But I have chamomile vanilla tea. See if it does mine. Anyway, so tomorrow then Jimmy was going to cook a turkey, and I'll make stuffing and pumpkin pies. Ethan really wants my pumpkin pies. Ray used to love my pumpkin pies. Michael loves my pumpkin pies. G doesn't like pumpkin, so I have to make something. Well, she says she doesn't, but then I don't know, but I'll make her something. So I just got to go out and get some things, and then I don't know, we're going to go with them to get a tree, I think Saturday. We're going to do the tree. Tomorrow's Friday, right? I don't know what, we may do some other stuff tomorrow. I don't know what everybody wants to do. That's why I can't stay up too late, because everybody's already gone to bed. So let's see. Let's get right to this. And most people will watch on the replay. That's okay. You'll have something to replay. Let me see. We were on Cindy's deposition, right? And where did Cindy's deposition go? Oh, I think I have it right over here. I think I have it up from last night. Cindy deposition. There we go. Okay. And we were on page 84. Okay. Okay, so they were talking about Caylee, and they were talking about whether she was throwing tantrums and things, right? And she says that she usually did it at home. She never had a tantrum when we were out. It was usually at home, usually towards the evening when she was tired, and I knew. Says, what was this lady's name again? Murdoch? Mrs. Murdoch? I think that's Mrs. Murdoch. I hope so. And Cindy said it was probably because she was tired, so I'd usually take her and put her in the tub and let her cry until she got it out of her system. And then Mrs. Murdoch said, okay, did she throw herself on the floor? I mean, some kids will bang their head. Cindy said once in a while, she wouldn't really throw herself on the floor, but she'd get down and just do this on her bed or on the floor, but she'd bend over and do it. And Mrs. Murdoch said, okay. And she said, I tell her not to do that, but then she'd get up and walk into another room. Do it again? Said Mrs. Murdoch. Do it again, said Cindy. Right. Then Cindy said, so, Mrs. Murdoch said, okay, what sort of things did she like? Cindy said, you mean like to do? Mrs. Murdoch said, well. And then she said, or to eat, or Mrs. Murdoch said, I have a 7-year-old. And things went in the predictable stage where first it was Elmo, then Sesame Street became I'm 3, I don't like Sesame Street. Cindy goes, yeah. And she goes, so I like Dora. Then, yeah, says Cindy. Miss Murdoch says Barbie. And now it's like Hannah Montana and the Black Eyed Peas. Yeah, well, she grew up on Black Eyed Peas. And then they start talking about that baby Einstein. Okay, I'm going to go past that. Then Cindy says she watched, I think Dora was on Nickelodeon, yeah. Wherever SpongeBob and the Little Einsteins and Dora was on, she'd watch a little bit. Okay, says Miss Murdoch. Cindy says, but she didn't spend all day in front of the TV. She would do lots of other things. Okay, well, you had a pool at your house? Yes, says Cindy. How long did you have that? Miss Murdoch said. Cindy says, since 2002, I think 2002 or 2003, somewhere around there. All right, when your kids were older? Yeah, they were older, said Cindy. Okay, Caylee liked to go in the pool? Uh-huh. Did she spend time in an inner tube, or did you put floaties on her? Cindy said, we actually have the vest that buckled and went through her legs, or one that you pulled on like a bodysuit. Okay, that she couldn't pull off. And Miss Murdoch said, did you have her do any sort of swim lessons or anything like that? No, says Cindy. Safe start, said Mrs. Murdoch. No, she was learning to swim. Miss Murdoch said, who was teaching her? And Cindy said, Casey and I. And Miss Murdoch said, okay, if you had to put a percentage on who took care of Caylee the most, who would you say, and at what percentage? Cindy said, probably Casey and then me. And then, let's see. Miss Murdoch said 50-50, or would you divide that? Cindy said maybe 60-40. And Miss Murdoch said 60, Casey? Yeah, said Cindy. Miss Murdoch said 40 you, or uh-huh, says Cindy. Where does George figure into all this, says Miss Murdoch. Well, says Cindy, George was probably never by himself that often, maybe 10% of the time, most of the time. She was with us, and if he was watching her by himself, that would have meant Casey and I were doing something. Miss Murdoch says, together? Cindy says, uh-huh. Okay, says Miss Murdoch. Cindy says, so. Miss Murdoch says, all right. Who did Caylee's laundry? Cindy says, all three of us did. Miss Murdoch said, okay, do you think you bought most of her clothes? Cindy says, probably, yeah, because I spoiled her with clothes. Okay. And then Cindy says, but Casey bought a lot too. Miss Murdoch says, was Caylee a child that wanted to wear the same thing over and over again? Cindy said just a couple of things. She liked different things, but to sleep in, she had a couple of her favorite nighttime things that she liked. Okay, said Mrs. Murdoch. Were they character sort of nightgowns? Cindy said, yeah. Miss Murdoch says, which ones? And Cindy says, Spider-Man. And Miss Murdoch says, Spider-Man? And Cindy says, it was actually a Spider-Man t-shirt, and she had a couple of Spider-Man pajamas. Okay, any other favorite any other favorite clothes? Cindy says, she liked to wear her dresses. Okay. She had a lot of dresses, says Cindy. She liked her dresses and her hats. Miss Murdoch said, did you let her pick out her own clothes? Cindy says, most of the time. Miss Murdoch says, okay. Did she have some matching problems? Sometimes kids put together. Cindy says she was pretty good. Some weird combinations, says Mrs. Murdoch. Cindy says, no, she was pretty good. Miss Murdoch says, okay. Did she like to play dress up? Cindy says, uh-huh. Miss Murdoch says, did you buy her things for dress up? Sunglasses, feather boas? Yeah, stuff like that. She said a bunch of Casey's friends bought her, and then Miss Murdoch says crowns, and she said, yeah, Casey's friends bought her some stuff. Casey bought her stuff. I bought her stuff. George bought her stuff. Lee bought her a Princess Leia outfit. Miss Murdoch says, is Lee a Star Wars person? Yes, says Cindy. Okay. And then they branched off into like a Star Wars conversation. We're not going to go over that because it's not relevant. And they took a recess, and then they came back, and then Miss Murdoch said, okay, where were we? All right, I think when we took our break, we were talking about Lee being a Star Wars buff. Uh-huh, says Cindy. Oh my gosh, and now they go off on another tangent with these people. Okay, let's go back here now. Mrs. Burdick. Yeah, Burdick. What was I calling her? Murdoch. Burdick. Okay. So Ms. Burdick says, what did you know about Casey's social life before Caylee was born? Obviously, she was an adult. She was out of school. Cindy said she didn't go out a lot. I know she worked a lot of evenings before Caylee was born when she was at Kodak. Miss Burdick says, okay, how about after? How about immediately after Caylee was born? Did she have a social life with an infant? Cindy says, no, not really. It was her and Jessie until June. And Miss Burdick says, okay. Cindy says, it was just those two. They double dated, but they didn't go out that much. Miss Burdick says, at some point, did that begin to change? Cindy said, yeah, I started encouraging her to go out after they broke up. Okay, said Miss Burdick. When was... Cindy said, I told her. When was that? Says Mrs. Burdick. Cindy says, they broke up in June. Of, Mrs. Burdick said. I know you said this, but 2006, says Cindy. Okay, says Mrs. Burdick. Cindy says it was either the end of May, I think it was June of 2006, somewhere around my birthday, I think. Okay, now, at that point, is your husband back in the residence? Says Miss Burdick. Cindy says, towards the end of June. Now, over the course of the past year, a lot of the pictures of Casey at parties or at different functions have surfaced, says Miss Burdick. Cindy says, was that shocking? No, says Cindy. To you? Cindy says most of those are from previous years. Okay, says Mrs. Burdick. So, says Cindy. Miss Burdick says, I don't have them all in front of me for me to give you a date on them, for you to give me a date on them. Did you know that, hold on a minute, she had an active social life, for lack of a better descriptor? Cindy said, I don't find any of those photos any different from than any other 19 to 21-year-old social life or a 22-year-old social life. Okay, says Mrs. Burdick. Cindy says there's not that many pictures that were out at night. I mean, a lot of them were during the day, and most of them were before Caylee went missing, so... And Mrs. Burdick said, okay. Did you know that she was going to parties in different places like that? And Cindy Anthony says, I knew that she went to the no clothes party or anything about clothes party. In fact, I thought she was better dressed than everybody else. I mean, Casey is, you know. Says Mrs. Burdick. They call her Mom. All of her friends call her Mom. Okay, said Mrs. Burdick. She dressed like a mom. Okay, you said most of them predate. Cindy said a lot of them. Miss Burdick said June 16th of 2008. Yeah, says Cindy. Most of them predate her 21st birthday. Okay, says Mrs. Burdick. Are you aware that some of those posts date June 16th of 2008? Yes, says Cindy. From your review of them, which do you believe post date June 16th? Cindy says the only ones that I know that are after June 16th, June or right around June 16th, are the ones with her at Fusions. Okay, says Mrs. Burdick. Cindy says she started going to Fusions on, I think, her first time was the 13th of June. That Friday? Okay, says Mrs. Burdick. Did you learn about that as it was happening, or do you believe you learned about it after the inception of this case? And Cindy says, I knew about her working with the shot girls in June, so most of this was after the case started. Okay. Now Mrs. Burdick says, I'm going to show you what we've marked just for purposes of the deposition as states. I'll have you look at that photograph. Is it the one of the photographs that you believe was taken after June 16th? So she shows her one. Cindy looks at it and says yes. Ms. Burdick says 2008 at Fusion. Says Cindy. Ms. Burdick says, okay, do you know anyone in the photograph besides your daughter? No. Okay, have you come to learn anything about anyone in the photograph? Yeah, a few people, says Cindy. All right, says Mrs. Burdick, can you tell me who? And she says, I don't know. This is Mrs. Burdick. You want to distinguish them, perhaps by what they're wearing? Cindy says, I can't give you names. Miss Burdick said, how about what they're wearing? Like the white female in some sort of garment. what do you know about any of them? Cindy says, I believe the two girls they look like they have uniforms on for a nightclub. The torn teal shirts. Okay, says Mrs. Burdick. And Cindy says, I believe those are two of the shot girls. And then the other three gentlemen, as far as I know, they were associated with Tony. Miss Burdick said, how did you learn that? Cindy says, through the course of all of this. Okay, anyone specifically tell you that those were associates of Tony's, says Mrs. Burdick? Cindy says, Dominic did. Dominic Caylee. All right. Says Miss Burdick, this is an individual. Hold on a second. This is an individual, since we haven't talked about him on the record yet, that your family or you and your husband hired to do some private investigation work for you? Right. Says, because she really says that. Says Cindy Anthony. And then Miss Burdick says, okay, did you ask Dominic Caylee to try to determine who some of these people were? Yeah. Yes. All right. How did he do that? If you know. Cindy said, I believe he said he had someone that he knew actually go to fusions. Said Mrs. Burdick. And as far as I know, she frequented there a few times and kind of got to know some of them. And then, let's see. Miss Burdick said, she, the person who he had go? Says Cindy, yeah. Who is this? Cindy said, I have no idea who the name is. It was just someone that he said he knew that could kind of look like the rest of the crowd. Okay, said Mrs. Burdick. Someone a lot younger than Mr. Caylee? Yes, says Cindy. Okay, said Mrs. Burdick. Yeah, says Cindy. And me. DBC looks familiar from Tony's MySpace page as well. Okay, all right, says Miss Burdick. You're talking about something that's on. Cindy said the letters on the two male t-shirts. Okay, is there a blackmail? Yes, says Cindy. Question, in there, do you know who that is? Cindy says, I forget what his name is. I know I gave you some information on him. I can't remember his name. That stuff doesn't stay with me very long. Okay, what was it that they were trying to determine when you asked Mr. Caylee to look into those people? Cindy says, if we could locate any of them and speak to any of them to see, if Caylee had confided in any of them. And Mrs. Burdick says, what did you learn? And Cindy says, I think the black gentleman is incarcerated. As far as what my understanding is, he was 4, says Miss Burdick. Cindy says, wanted for some crime that he committed. I'm not sure if it's drug-related or manslaughter or whatever. But as far as I was told, he was incarcerated somewhere in Tampa. Okay, you can't recall his name at this time. No, says Cindy, I'm not really good with names or people that I don't see all the time. Mrs. Burdick said, sure. Do you believe, or did you learn through some other source, that he's affiliated with this entertainment group? Cindy says, Society Entertainment? Society Entertainment? Says Miss Burdick. Yes, says Cindy. I that's what I was told. All right. Do you know if any of these individuals have a connection to the Sawgrass Apartments? Hold on a minute. Cindy says, I was told they did. Mrs. Burdick said, okay, tell me what you were told. Cindy says, what I was told, and by whom, says Mrs. Burdick. Cindy says, what I was told through Mr. Casey is that Society Entertainment had a corporate account or a lease at Sawgrass Apartments. Uh-huh, said Mrs. Burdick. Cindy says, and they actually had 2 or 3 apartments. Okay. And Cindy says, is what I was told. Okay, Mrs. Burdick said, did you ever attempt to contact any of these individuals yourself? No, says Cindy. The only person that I spoke with on the phone was Tony. Tony Lazzaro? Cindy says, Lazzaro, right. Ms. Burdick says, okay. Cindy says, I spoke to him only once on the phone, and that was like a week after Casey was incarcerated. Okay, says Mrs. Burdick. When was it that you found out that Society Entertainment had some affiliation with Sawgrass Apartments? Cindy says, I can't tell you when exactly. It was sometime, probably September, October, if I had a rough estimate. All right, says Mrs. Burdick. Cindy says, I can't say for sure. Do you, says Mrs. Burdick. Cindy says, but it was last fall. All right, do you believe that you learned that during a period of time when Casey, your daughter was out of custody? And Cindy says, I can't say whether or not that was the case. Ms. Burdick says, did you ask her about these people? Actually, no, says Cindy. Why not, says Mrs. Burdick. I didn't. Because I didn't, dang it. Ms. Burdick said, okay. Cindy said it might have been after she went back in. I don't know. And then Ms. Burdick says, okay, did you relay that information that Mr. Casey obtained through this other individual to Mr. Baez or anyone in his employ? I think so, says Cindy. I think it may have been a conversation with him regarding that. All right. Do you have any report back to you about whether or not any of the people in that photograph have anything to do with your granddaughter's disappearance and murder? And Cindy says, I don't have anything specific that links the 2 of them, to that. So she didn't have anything specific at all. Okay. Then Ms. Burdick says, okay, do you have a suspicion? Cindy says, I don't know. From my understanding is that everything happened after she started working at Fusions. Okay, says Ms. Burdick. And then Cindy says, I have a suspicion that has something to do with it. Okay, says Ms. Burdick. And then Cindy says, that's just a gut feeling. Right, you're allowed to give your opinion. Right, says Cindy. Ms. Burdick says, that's why I asked what it was, okay? Okay. And then she says, Ms. Burdick says, any other pictures, aside from those taken at Fusion, that you believe post-date June 16th of 2008? No, says Cindy. Okay. All right, Ms. Burdick says. Do you believe now, a year later, that Casey worked at any time during 2007 and 2008? Cindy says, I never saw proof that she didn't. It was never presented to me. I never looked at any discovery. I was told by the sheriff's department that she didn't, so I'm taking it at their face value that she didn't. She got us into Halloween Horror Nights with her ID. And then Ms. Burdick says in 2007, and Cindy says in 2007. So that would have been, what, October? Right, says Miss Burdick. Cindy says, so I would have assumed that she was still working then. And then Miss Burdick says, all right, is that one of the things that you might have asked Mr. Casey to look into, whether or not Cindy says she was employed? Miss Burdick says, Casey was employed? Cindy says, no, I never asked him to do that. All right, said Miss Burdick, have you inquired of Mr. Baez or anyone else in his employ whether or not they have some proof that Casey was working during the time frame 2007-2008? Cindy says, I know the emails that we had of Casey with that Cheryl Davis from Hard Rock. I gave them to my son. Lee, says Miss Burdick. Right, says Cindy, and I'm not sure if I gave those to Mr. Baez or not, but I know he gave them to the sheriff's department. Okay, said Miss Burdick, but independent of what you learned from the sheriff's department, I'll ask you directly. Have you been updated over the course of the past year by Mr. Baez or anyone else who is working with him regarding, Cindy says? Miss Burdick says, about the status of various segments of the investigation. Cindy says, we don't really talk about, like most of my conversations with Mr. Baez is asking about how my daughter's doing. We really don't get into the investigative part with Mr. Baez. Okay. I mean, if there's something I think he needs to know, Cindy said, I'll let him know, but I don't think we haven't really had a whole lot of conversations lately, but when we do, it's always asking about how Casey is doing. All right, did you provide Mr. Baez with anything that would establish that Casey was working in 2007 or 2008? Cindy says, I think the only thing that I gave Mr. Baez was Casey's ID. Okay, what ID are you talking about, said Miss Burdick. Her universal ID, says Cindy. Was this on a lanyard? Uh-huh, says Cindy. What, a shamrock? Uh-huh, says Cindy. Miss Burdick says, when did you become in possession of that? And Cindy says, I found it probably 2 months after Caylee was. It was probably sometime in September. Where did you find it, said Miss Burdick. Tucked in a drawer somewhere, says Cindy. In Casey's bedroom? Caylee's bedroom? No, said Cindy. Kitchen, said Miss Burdick. I think it was somewhere in my bedroom, because the last night that I had seen it was when the sheriff's department was at our house the night of the 15th and 16th. Okay, right, said Miss Burdick. Cindy says, because it was with the purse that her handbag was on the front seat of her car, and I assume the sheriff's office had it. Right. Your statement suggests that they took it, said Miss Burdick. And Cindy says, yes, I assume that they had it. Okay, said Miss Burdick. And I found it a few months later. All right, said Miss Burdick, and what significance do you believe it has? I don't know, says Cindy. I mean, it was something that I was looking for, so I had given it to Mr. Baez months and months ago, and I can't even exactly say when. Okay, says Mrs. Burdick, with the lanyard attached? Cindy says, yes, that was, Miss Burdick says, the whole thing you gave to him? I think that was before Casey came home the first time, Cindy said. Okay. Cindy says, yeah, the shamrock and everything. Did you keep a notebook of what you did and what you did and when you did it? No, not really. I started to write notes and then I quit. It was just too much information, said Miss Burdick. Cindy said, too much information. Too overwhelming, said Mrs. Burdick. Too overwhelming, says Cindy. You know, I was going on no sleep and no food, and it just got to be too much. I'm supposed to be journaling now, and I still can't do that. Okay. Cindy said, I just can't bring myself to do that. All right, said Miss Burdick. Did you ask anyone how it got into whatever drawer you found it in? I don't know, says Cindy. I don't know how it got there. I don't know if I put it there. I can't remember. I have no idea. I truly believed it was still with Casey's stuff. Okay, says Mrs. Burdick. Where were we? Okay, said Mrs. Burdick, right? All right. If Casey wasn't working in 2007 and 2008, how did she get money, said Miss Burdick. Cindy says, I don't know. I mean, she borrowed a lot of money from me. How much do you think, said Mrs. Burdick. I have no idea. Probably thousands. I can't tell you how much. I never kept track. I don't ever keep track of it. I gave money to Lee, too. I didn't keep track. Okay, are you talking about like a 20 here, a 20 there? Here, a 20 there, a 20. Yeah, says Sydney. Yeah. And sometimes, I mean, I know I helped her out with some of the bills she got from the hospital with Caylee. And was she insured? Said Miss Burdick. Cindy says, yes, she was, but there was still, I mean, there's only so much. There's still a lot that you have to pay out of pocket. Right. Can they go on to others? Okay, back to this. So Miss Burdick says, this is money that you freely gave to her? Yes, says Cindy. All right. If there's also money that she took from you? Yes, says Cindy. How much do you think? Probably around $5,000. Okay, I imagine that wasn't all in one lump. No, says Cindy. Some? No. How did she access your money, says Mrs. Burdick. She had gotten one of my credit cards. Miss Burdick said, is this the J.C. Penney credit card? Or, no, wait, well, that was just a couple of hundred on the J.C. Penney card. No, she had actually used one of my credit cards that was paid off, and that's how I know about the amount I found. Probably late 2007. That was like $4,500 on that card, which I had a zero balance on. Okay, who was the bank on that card? I'm not sure if it was Citibank or not, says Cindy. Okay, Miss Burdick says, okay, what kinds of things was she buying on your card? Cindy says, I don't even know. I never saw the statements. All I know is I got a call and then I switched it over to another credit card. Miss Burdick said, and canceled that card. Okay, why didn't you see the statements? Cindy says, I don't know. I don't know there were statements because I had the card paid off, so you usually don't get statements on a zero card. So, right, says Miss Burdick. And then Cindy says, I never saw statements on it, so I didn't know until I got a phone call. Do you think that statements actually came to your house? Probably, says Cindy. And then Mrs. Burdick said, probably. They were disposed of? Possibly. It's a possibility. Did she take cash from you? Yeah, Cindy says. She would tell me if she took cash. She'd say, Mom, I'm going to take a 20, or I'd give her a 20 or a 10 or whatever. Did she take cash from you without your permission? Not usually, says Cindy. Ever? I can't say never. Never say never. Okay. I usually know what I had in my billfold. That's weird. Just for a woman to say a billfold, isn't it? Small amount, said Mrs. Burdick. Yeah. Of cash? I never carried much more than $50 in my billfold anyway. Okay. How about using checks? Yeah. She wrote some checks to Target. During what time frame? Cindy says probably 2007, 2008. Okay, says Mrs. Burdick. Do you know what she was buying with were these checks? Yes. From your account? They were my checks. Okay. From my account, I didn't see receipts, and they would be anywhere from 25 to 90. Once in a while, a little bit over 100, but no more than 125 at the most. Okay, and they would be random, 30 here, 40 here. Okay, are you aware of her taking money from other members of your family? I'm not sure if she took George's money. He usually borrowed from me, so what's yours is mine, and what's mine is yours, said Mrs. Burdick. Yeah, said Cindy. So I think she had taken some things from Lee a couple of times. Cash, said Miss Burdick. Coins, maybe some quarters here and there. He would roll quarters and maybe have a $10 roll of, quarters. Okay, said Miss Burdick. Cindy says then a couple of times he said he was missing. When she was in high school, she wrote a couple of his checks. That was Lee's? Yeah, says Cindy. That was the kind of an isolated incident. I mean, that was like her senior year. I think she wrote 2 checks off of his account, and she paid him back. Okay, said Mrs. Burdick. How about using a credit card of your husband's? I don't know if George ever had a credit card, said Cindy. I'm not aware. And did she use Lee's credit card at all? I'm not aware of that. Did she ever open up any accounts in your name and use it? Cindy says, not that I'm aware of. Okay, how about your extended family? Cindy says, my mom. There's 2 checks, and that I'm aware of my mom. Okay, when were those written? She says, one was written on Caylee's birthday in 2007, and another one, I believe, was sometime at the end of April, or sometime in May 2007. Sometime around there. I'm aware of those because my mom told me. When did your mom tell you about those checks? Cindy says, I know it was probably a few weeks after that happened in August of 2007, and then maybe a week after it happened. Like I said, it was either April or May of 2008. When you went to visit your father on June 15th of 2008 with Caylee? Uh-huh. Well, how did she go to visit on June 15th of 2008 with Caylee? Caylee wasn't there. That's a mistake. Question, was your mother there? Answer, Cindy. No, she was at home. We went to see her after we visited my dad. Okay, did your mother make any statements to you at that time about Casey? Is what she says. Stealing from her? No, says Cindy. I believe we talked about that day. I can't remember. I don't think we did. We had talked about it prior to that, and then Ms. Burdick says, okay, the last incident when you said, Casey, did she steal one of her grandma's checks? The only time she took a check was in August of 2007. She took a check, but she never cashed a birthday check from. Okay, I think her 21st birthday, she never cashed it, and she used the number off of it, from what I understand, to pay a phone bill. It was either April or May. To pay her cell phone bill, said Miss Burdick. Uh-huh, said Cindy. Okay, and your mom at some point found out about that? Right. Miss Burdick said, did you confront Casey, or did your mother confront Casey? Cindy said, I said something to Casey, and I told her that she needed to make good with with her grandmother. Okay, when you confronted her, what did she say? Did she admit it? Yeah, Cindy says she admitted it. She didn't deny it. And she said she was going to rectify it with her grandmother. Did she ever? I know she had spoken to her on the phone, but I don't know. Did she apologize? Cindy said if she ever went up, yeah, I know she had written her some emails, and I don't know. She had talked to her on the phone, but I stayed out of that. That was between the two of them. Okay, were you angry about it? And then Cindy says, well, yeah, I was angry about it. And Miss Burdick says, okay. Cindy says, but what can I say? I just told her I was disappointed in her, and I was upset that she didn't come to me if she needed it. How much was it? Said Mrs. Burdick. Cindy says, I think the bill, the other one, was between $200 and $300. The cell phone bill? Yeah, says Cindy. Okay, says Miss Burdick. $280 something maybe? I don't know for sure. Miss Burdick said, did you notice any changes in Casey's demeanor in the years prior to her incarceration? Casey always told some half-truths, but I think probably a little bit more in the last year. Okay. And I realized that more than I did before. At the time, I didn't realize it. Right, said Mrs. Burdick. Well, what would she lie about or tell you half-truths about? And then Cindy says, well, obviously her employment and stuff, but who she would spend buying gifts for and stuff, but she was using the money for, I found out later on. She was buying people gifts. I know her one friend that was in the military, Brandon Snow. Okay. I didn't realize she was, buying him stuff and sending it overseas to him. And a lot of that I found out was that she was shopping online and then shipping it, I guess, over to him. Okay, says Mrs. Burdick. So, Cindy says, Miss Burdick says, all right, so you said about her job, about using money. Did you find out if she was lying about who she was with? What are you having? What are you getting? You. Are you looking for peanut butter? Mm-hmm. Isn't it? It's either in there or in the pantry.
I'm going to get something.
Okay. All right, so you said about her job that okay, answer. Well, I know a couple of times that she said she was with Danny and she was with Ricardo now. I didn't know that at the time. Okay, says Mrs. Burdick. So, or she was with Amy. I didn't realize Amy was living with Ricardo, so that was a half-truth that she said she was with Amy. Amy was living with Ricardo. She was, staying with Ricardo. I didn't really realize about that relationship. I thought he was her gay buddy. Oh, you thought Ricardo was gay, said Mrs. Burdick? That's what she told me. Okay. Are we talking about June of 2008 telling these? Prior to that, too, says Cindy. Okay, says Mrs. Burdick. Any other changes in her demeanor or her behavior besides an increase in the telling of half-truths? Yeah, and I have to go back to what you asked me earlier. There's bagels and cream cheese, too. Okay. Yeah, I have to go back to what you asked me earlier because I did speak to a therapist that I was going to back in April of May of 2008 of possibly bringing Caylee in for counseling with me because part of it was for me handling the financial aspect with Caylee. So at some point I did consider having her come into counseling, but then I nixed that because I wasn't happy with the counselor that I had. She was telling me to abandon my daughter and to make her and Caylee move out of the house, and that was not going to happen. So I just quit going to her. Okay, says Miss Burdick. What do you think? Why do you think Caylee told half-truths about these things? Any idea? I have no idea, says Cindy. I have no idea. Miss Burdick says, okay, did she ever say to you at any point in time that she was losing it? I'm putting that in quotes or words to that effect. Words to that effect. Cindy says a couple of times she said she was losing it, and I think it was in regards to relationships, with guys. Miss Burdick says, okay, when she told you that, did you ask her directly, what do you mean when you say you're losing it? Was she becoming overly emotional and tearful? Angry? And let's see, Cindy says, Caylee would cry once in a while. And Miss Burdick says, okay, did you all talk about it any more than that? Yeah, we talked about our feelings. Caylee and I talked all the time. That's what I'm saying. If she needed to confide in anybody, it was usually me. I don't think she wanted to disappoint me. I didn't realize that she had fallen more for Brandon than what she did. And from my understanding, if she had a miscarriage the year before, it would have been Brandon's baby. Okay, said Mrs. Burdick. We met Brandon. I know they went out a little bit, said Cindy. In fact, Brandon was at our house the day I found out about my dad's stroke. Okay, says Mrs. Burdick. So, what time frame are we talking about? Cindy says, we're talking probably 2007, and I know he was at the party in May in 2008 at Sean's house, and I know she was upset about seeing him because Miss Burdick said, how do you know that? And Cindy says, we talked about that. Her and I talked about that a little bit and seeing him, and he had another girlfriend in that. Miss Burdick said, okay, is this the clothes party? Yes, says Cindy. Okay, says Miss Burdick, anything but clothes. All right, you mentioned a couple of her boyfriends, Adam, Brandon, Jesse. Cindy says, Jesse. Ryan and her were good friends. She had a crush on Ryan Paisley since middle school. Actually, probably elementary school. He was a year older than her. They used to walk to school together at Liberty. She had a crush on him all through high school. She had a crush on him probably up through last year. She always had a crush on Ryan. He was just a good friend to her. Okay, have you mentioned Ricardo Morales already? Did you know that he was her boyfriend when he was? Cindy says, no, I didn't. In fact, she talked about Ricardo all the time and Ricardo's roommate, and I thought they were gay. And I still kind of think they are. But I think Ricardo is bisexual, personally, but that's my personal opinion. But, oh well. And Miss Burdick says, okay, is this someone that you met before? No, I never met him. June of '08? No, I never met him after all of this. Okay, says Miss Burdick. What about Anthony Rusciano? Do you know that name? I saw Tony Rusciano on an email that Cheryl Davis had. He was on an email that she had gotten from Cheryl. And I heard her talk about a Tony through the Hard Rock, but I don't know if he is that one that worked for the sheriff's department. I found that out later on. Casey had a lot of friends that she, since Miss Burdick, corresponded with on MySpace and emails, text messages and stuff. Okay, said Miss Burdick, before July of last year, did you have a MySpace page? Cindy says, I started that, I think July 3rd. Was on the day, that was one day just to get Casey's attention. Right, we'll talk about that in a minute. But did you, other than that, you hadn't? I've never been on MySpace before in my life, says Cindy. Okay, did you know William Waters? No, says Cindy. I didn't know him prior to all of this. Okay, how about Jeffrey Hopkins? That was someone that I knew. Mentioned as being a boyfriend of sorts. Right, I knew. I knew Lee had a friend, Jeff Hopkins, from school, and Casey had started talking about a Jeff Hopkins probably February, March 2006. She talked to me about him on several occasions. Supposedly they were dating. He had a little boy. I saw pictures of him and his son. Where? On his phone, she had them labeled. On her phone, she had them labeled boyfriend, and he was the screensaver. Him and his son were on her phone as their screensaver. All right, it said boyfriend? Says Cindy. It didn't have, if you click through, a name attached. It said boyfriend. Right, okay. When did you find out? Again, Cindy says, I heard her talking about a Tony. I had assumed it was the other Tony she was talking about. I didn't realize that she was seeing Lazaro. And after all of this, I found out about him. I believe the night of the 15th. Well, actually, the day of the 15th, when Amy took me to his apartment. Okay, we're talking about July 15th. Yes, July 15th. Okay, did you know Caylee to have any babysitters? Cindy, Lauren Gibbs. Lauren? Miss Burdick, And then Cindy says Christina Chester, Holly Gagney and the Gruns. It sounds like a group. Holly Gagney and the Gruns. Adam Lynch. Ugh. And Zanny. Those are the only ones I'm aware of besides George and myself. Right. Did you and Lee, Cindy says, list them in some sort of chronological order? No. Lauren was the first one. Lauren started watching Caylee when Casey was back to work. Okay, where did Lauren watch Caylee? 99% of the time, Cindy said, at our house, and once in a while, Casey would drop her off at the Gibbs house. And Lauren and her mom or her sister would help watch. Where did Lauren live, Miss Burdick says. She lives off of Chickasaw. Off of Curry Ford. I can't tell you the name of the development that they live off of. It's not too far. Maybe a couple of miles from the house. Could you find it if you wanted to? Yes. Okay, do you have a phone number for Lauren at the time? Yes, says Cindy. Was this somebody that Casey has known for a period of time? You going to bed now? You going back to bed?
Yeah.
Then I love you. Okay, what time is it? It's 3:47. Okay. Yeah, she went to school with Lauren. They were best friends in high school. All right, you mentioned Christina. Chester? Says Cindy. When did she watch Caylee? Says Miss Burdick. Oh, Casey and Christina had gone to school together, and Christina had a baby shortly after Casey did, so they would have play dates, and once in a while Christina would watch Caylee for a few hours if Casey would run errands or something. So it was not an all-day thing, but it was a few hours here or there. All right, says Mrs. Burdick, so an intermittent sort of babysitter. Yeah, says Cindy. This is someone who at the time was babysitting Caylee. You knew her first and last name. Cindy says, actually, I don't think I knew Christina's last name. I think Casey had told me, but I really didn't become to know Christina. I had met her on several occasions when she was in high school. Okay, said Miss Burdick, but Casey wasn't real close friends with Christina until after high school. Probably more so after Casey became pregnant and Christina was pregnant because they had more in common. All right. Where did Christina babysit Caylee, at your residence? No, says Cindy. Or at hers? I believe, well, Christina lived with her mom after her baby was born. I think Casey took Caylee there. And then I think Christina got an apartment in some apartment complex off of Chickasaw. So she was right around the corner from us, and then she just moved from there. I think she has a house now. Okay, says Mrs. Burdick. So, do you have a phone number for Christina, says Mrs. Burdick? No, says Cindy. Okay, if there would have been an emergency with Casey while Christina was watching Caylee, how would you communicate to Christina? I wouldn't have been able to, I mean. I know where Christina's mom lived, but I don't have a phone number for her. Okay, so you would have been able to go to Christina's mother's and get the message? Yes, right, Cindy says. Through that path? Right, says Cindy. I'm sure Casey would have given Christina my number, so if she wouldn't have heard from Casey, Christina probably would have reached out to me. Okay. Cindy says, because I always made sure, I would always ask Casey, do they have my numbers at work and my cell phone as backup? Okay, you mentioned Holly. Uh-huh, says Cindy. And you gave her last name, Gagney? And then she says, yes, okay, what do you know about her? And Cindy says, Holly was our neighbor for several years, and so, of course, I have Holly's cell phone. She was one of the neighbors that we socialized with. Okay, said Miss Burdick, and still do. And Miss Burdick said, that would be somebody that you knew on site? And she says, yes, that if there was an emergency with... Right. Casey said there'd be no problem. Casey. Miss Burdick said, Casey, there would be no problem being able to... Cindy said, and I knew where she lived. Yes. Track her down, said Miss Burdick. Yes, says Cindy. Okay, the Grunns, I know who they are. Right, says Cindy, but I couldn't go to their house and know exactly where. I did have Jesse's cell phone. Okay, says Miss Burdick. And then Cindy says, but there is times Richard watched, and I did not have the house number or his cell phone. I would have to go through Jesse to get his parents' number. Sure, okay. Adam Lynch was a boyfriend? Yes, he was one of Casey's good friends. When did he watch Caylee? He watched Casey... I was in the hospital before George and I got back together, and he watched Caylee a couple of times when Casey came up to see me at the hospital. Yeah. In the house? Yeah, she says. And then Mrs. Burdick said, okay, just for a couple of days, and that's it? Yeah. He would watch her once in a while for Casey when she was working too. Okay. All right, let me see what's going on. It says, let me see where you guys are. If you are, you're right over here. Watch, I'm out of, hi, Lucky Ducky. Hold on a minute. Let's see what's going on here. Let me make this a little larger, because why? See what happened while I was away. Let me see what happened while I was away. I don't know if you're still here, White Angel. Go to the video from yesterday. A very tragic thing. Hi, happy Thanksgiving, Twisted Stitches. Hello, Chrissy. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Hi, Holly, Naomi. How are you? Let's see who else is here. Video reel I got before. Twisted Stitches. Happy Thanksgiving, White Angel. Let me see. Tor Victoria, hi. Happy Thanksgiving. Lucky Ducky. Happy Thanksgiving. Let's see. This case really showed me that anything goes when it comes to putting reasonable doubt out there. It was also that, but it was just something else with the charges and that the prosecution didn't. So there's a lot of things, and then they found her so late that they couldn't. That about the cause of death, right? So yeah, a lot of things. So craziness. So what's everybody doing? It's late. It is late, and I'm tired. I've been going all day long, and it's been a day. It's been fun, but it's been heavy, and it's life. I wish I could think of something. I wanted to remember the name of that song that Ethan said. Hold on a minute. I want to ask. Just hang on for 1 second, okay? Hang on for 1 second. I just have to do something really quickly. Really quickly. I'm right here. Just hold on. What did you say the name of that song was? That song you said. The one with the E. With the E that you heard you said. Because I just want to know, because I don't remember the name of it. Because I want to listen to it and see which one it is, because a lot of times I don't get it by the name. It sounded like a familiar group. What was it? What is it called? And what is it called? Oh, okay. Why? It sounds like an old song. All right. All right, love you. Bye. Okay. Hold on, I gotta write something down before I forget it. I've gotta write something down before I forget it. Okay. Sorry, I had to find something else. So I want to listen to something later. Okay, I'm back. It's 7:15 p.m. there. Oh my goodness. But yeah, I'm going to do the word thing, and then I'm going to go. I don't know that I'm going to fall asleep, but I'm going to lay down and unwind a little bit. Let's see. Where's the word cookie? Word cookie. Hope everybody had a good Thanksgiving. I've got to do a bunch of members' lives before the 15th of December, so I got to get a move on. I have like 6 to do. Can't believe we have 3 days of November left. Get out of here. Get out of here. That can't be so. Say it ain't so. Oh my gosh, I just said I have to do a members live. Isn't that crazy? I just said I have to do a members live. That's crazy. Why did I even say that? That's crazy. Victoria, I know I said members live. I have to do a members live. What did I even do? How did I? That's crazy. Yeah, memes wasn't there. It wasn't there. It wasn't there. Okay, what do we got here? I've got mirror. Oh. Ember? Yeah, that's it. You got it. Very good, Victoria. And then it must be embers, right? Very good. Thank you, Victoria. Oh my goodness, that was stumping me. It was stumping me. Play a little bit of this and then I will. Ever very good. New, yeah. There we go, new. Rev. Oh, brother. Hi, Catherine. Whenever. Yeah, very good. Happy Thanksgiving. Let's see here. We gotta get an E word up here, huh? Didn't I try that? I think I tried that Victorian. Oh, maybe I didn't. Which I might think I tried something. I didn't. Well, how about newer? Revere? Okay. Hart, I'm sending your package out and I have it packed. And do you remember that book from a long time ago? Do you remember that book? And I said I was going to send it to you. And then the last time I forgot to send it to you because that was when I was leaving for Edisto and I was packing up so quickly and I didn't put it in there. I put it in your package this time. I didn't bill you or anything yet. I just packed everything up and I'm going to go through that and do the measurements and everything tomorrow. But I packed up a lot of boxes. And, okay, so just so you know, that book is going to be in there. Okay. We've got never and newer and okay, let's see here. Eve? No. Oh, what about Reeve? Extra word. You were? Extra word, right? I didn't send anybody Twisted. I didn't send anybody invoices yet. I'm going to. Actually, yeah. I have your stuff Twisted, ready to go. I have that thing you wanted me to make. I don't know if you want me to make it and then send everything. You know, I can try to see. But I have your stuff. I just didn't invoice you yet. Don't worry about it. I'm not going to forget it. I'm not going anywhere. I'm here. And I'm going to do some of that stuff tomorrow, but I have a few orders that people put in for things, so I'm going to see what I can get done. I have to. Oh, okay. If you're not in any hurry, then yeah, let me make that, and then I can send it all along if you're not in any hurry. Even? Did I? Oh, even. Even now, when I come shining through, I swear I think of you. God, I wish you knew. Green. Renew. Renew. Very good. Renew. Let's see. Oh, yeah, that's probably what it is, Catherine. Uh-oh. Yay, we did it. Okay. We are going to call that a night. Because I have to get some rest. All right? I love you guys. God bless. Prayers. Be good. Stay well. Be kind. Love you guys. And prayers for all that need them. We all need them. Big time. All right, guys. Everybody be good. Till we see you again. Bye. Goodbye. Let's see where I have you that I'm going to say goodbye to you. Think over here. Yes? No. Where's my thing to put you guys good night? Oh, it's over here. Yeah, I'm glad to. All right, have a good night.